All right, what's up, everybody, and welcome to your Monday edition of the Post Up here on Boot Crew Media. I'm your host, David Grubb. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had a good weekend. I know it's hot out there, but I hope you're staying cool. What we're going to do today is we're going to be positive. As you see at the bottom of the screen, it says Motivational Monday. And I want people to be upbeat this week because I myself and have discussed this, and so have other folks on this channel and other channels as well. We've talked about the problems with the New Orleans Pelicans, whether it's through the organization and ownership, whether it's with the players themselves, whether it's with the arena, the city, whatever. We have discussed the problems, and we could continue to do that ad nauseum. And there are real problems. But I don't think any of us became basketball fans for the problems. I don't think any of us became basketball fans to be miserable. We became basketball fans because we love the game. We love the artistry. We love the athleticism. We love the competition. Before we knew what a championship was, before we understood the business of basketball, before we understood salary caps, trades, or any of those things, we loved the game. We became fans of teams, whether it's the Pelicans or your first love or whether it was another team. You know, we fell in love with basketball. And why did we do that? So let's get back to the joy, at least for this day, before any more news breaks, before we get any more things that kind of bother us or make us skeptical about what's ahead. Let's focus on the positive today, and let's look at the reasons for optimism for this fan base. What do you have to look forward to potentially with the New Orleans Pelicans, and what things feel like real opportunities for growth for this basketball team? Now you start with the starters. Let's go right there. And I think that the Pelicans do have a very competitive starting lineup. They're top four to open the season, whether you want to call it a big three or a big four. If you call it a big three, you're talking about Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy, and Jordan Poole. If you could extend that to a big four, yeah, throw Herb Jones into that mix. You take those four starters, and I like their chances on most nights, right? There are very few players who can guard Zion Williamson one-on-one. There are very few teams that can guard Zion Williamson two-on-one. He gets double teamed more than any other player in the league. That shows you the amount of respect that teams have for his ability to score one-on-one. And I know that there are folks who say Zion needs to expand his game. He needs to expand his game. Sure, as he gets older. But the best thing to do is be yourself. Giannis Antetokounmpo is 10 years in this league. And people have been begging him to add a three-point shot for the longest time. And all that man does is rack up top 5 finishes for MVP. When you have a force as devastating as Zion Williamson can be, when he is at full strength, you let him do what he does. And you work around that. And I think that the Pelicans have to embrace this unique athlete and what he does on the court. And I think that they're ready to do that. And that is a source of optimism. The faith that Joe Dumars is putting in Zion Williamson this season is a critical element in Zion's growth. I have said before, and I firmly believe this, that Zion Williamson has never been given either the opportunity or the responsibility of leadership. He has been allowed simply to exist in the sphere of basketball. And I am encouraged, and this is up to Zion to fulfill this mandate, but I'm encouraged that Joe Dumars has explicitly said in public, and he has said to Zion Williamson in private, that this is his team, and he has to take responsibility for its success and or failure. That is an important step. And we can discuss how if somebody hasn't shown you leadership at one time, they may not be able to show it in the future. And the past is definitely prologue for the present. And we have to understand those things. But I think there's also a maturation process in life. And that sometimes when people start, they are not ready for responsibilities. And we could argue that the Pelicans are late with giving him these responsibilities. And I would say that they absolutely are. They should have done this from the beginning. They should have established the hierarchy that he's a franchise player. But I think at this time, there is a thought of better late than never. And if Zion embraces this, this is a fantastic opportunity for him, and it will make the Pelicans better. It seems as if he's growing into that on his own, but it is important and beneficial that the organization embraces that as well, publicly and privately. It is important for the other players to understand. It is important for Zion Williamson to understand. It's important for Willie Green to understand. And I think that that was a big step in the positive for the New Orleans Pelicans. The previous years were about an undecided structure of leadership. Was it Brandon's team? Was it Zion's team? Was it CJ's team? Whose team is it? Who's going to step up and be the leader of this team? And Zion Williamson, while he will never be the most articulate and outspoken vocal leader of this franchise, he can certainly set the tone with his play and his presence. And if Zion Williamson can be healthy and play 65 plus games regularly for this team, get himself into that position, then he can reestablish himself as one of the most feared players in this league, even though he is still feared right now. That fear is mitigated by the fact that if he's not available. So we'll see what his availability looks like this season, but you have to be encouraged by that part. You move on to Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, and I put them together because they came in together to the Pelicans as rookies, and their connection as players is evident on the basketball court. And I think when you look at them as a duo, you see immediately what their impact can be for a winning Pelicans team. You start with Herb Jones, the easy part. Herb just makes basketball players and makes the people around him better. It is good that his contract is secure. And though there are concerns how it will age, I think that there are things that mitigate that. Number one, the cap will continue to rise in the short term because of the TV revenue. As long as this current TV deal is in place, the cap will rise on an annual basis, meaning that Herb will take up less of the salary cap as this deal goes on. I also try to view this deal as a 5-year, $17 million deal rather than a 3-year extension added onto it. I think of the whole contract when it comes to Herb Jones. Herb is the kind of player that every team has to have. When you look at a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder that just won a championship, they're role players, they're elite role players. Whether you're talking about a Isaiah Hartenstein who makes way more money than Herb Jones does, where you're talking about a Chet Holmgren who's this stage still a role player. When you talk about elite role players have to exist on your team in order to win championships. Herb Jones, the one thing you'll never question about him is his dedication to his game and improving. And over the first 3 years, we saw steady improvement from Herb Jones. As a passer, as a shooter, defensively, he even got better than what he was as a rookie. And I think that the great thing for Herb going forward is that the flaws in his game, the weaknesses, are correctable. There is only room for improvement, and the things that he's bad at are minimal. What's Herb Jones bad at? Like, try to figure what's the weakest, like, what's he bad at? Even if you talk about his weaknesses where he's less good at things, what's he bad at? He's an above average free throw shooter. He is for his career, a decent league average 3-point shooter. He can move without the basketball. He is a solid connector as a passer. He makes you better offensively by moving and connecting and screening. He makes you better defensively because he communicates. He is able to cover multiple people. What's he bad at? And when you take that approach, when you look at a player and you say, I don't really have any weaknesses here. Like, he's not going to be an offensive force, but he doesn't take anything from the table ever. When he's on the court, you are better. And that is an incredible, he's also a veteran now. He's a leader of this team. He's the most respected guy in that locker room for his work, for what he's willing to put his body through, what he's willing to put himself through, and what his mental approach is on a day-to-day basis. That's invaluable. And I think the Pelicans paid for some of that as well, for some institutional continuity. And Herb Jones certainly brings that to the table. When we talk about Trey Murphy, what you have to look at with Trey is like, you have a budding two-way superstar here. And I don't know what Trey's ceiling is, and I don't want to put a ceiling on him. And I said this on Sunday night on our podcast, talking about the Pelicans' future. And I believe this. I believe Trey Murphy can be a middle-class man's Jason Tatum. I think he can be a guy who gives you 25, 6, and 6 every night. I absolutely do. I absolutely believe that Trey Murphy can give you 25, 6, and 6 and be a guy who threatens 50, 40, 90 every year. With his athleticism, with his ability to shoot the basketball, with his improving ball handling, his improving defense, he has been a solid rebounder at times when he's put in the right position. When you play him as either a small ball four, you play him opposite Zion Williamson, he's been able to be a solid rebounder. So I think that the growth in his game, and we saw 10 assist games last year, we saw Trey developing his entire package and embracing the role of being the number one guy on a number of nights for the Pelicans, where he had to take the offense by the horns and be the initiator and the finisher. That was something he's never done in his career. And for him to finish last season with 21 points per game in those 50-plus games that he played, 53, I believe, 21 points per game, shot it less than this season, less than the previous season from three. But again, that was part of the attention that he got. The shots weren't as easy. The offense wasn't necessarily catering to Trey Murphy. And I think this year, you have to center Trey in your offensive schemes. When he's a starter, he's the number two option. When he's with the bench group, then he's the number one option. And I think that will make something, make Trey's evolution as a player a real factor this season. I think he should threaten for an all-star bid if the Pelicans are winning games. If they're hovering around 500 as we get further into the season, Trey should, if he's playing up to par, he should be in consideration for an all-star bid this season. This is when you start making that leap. Trey's got the money, he's got the game, and he has all the elements of what you would have in place for a potential franchise player. He's got the charisma, he's got the charm, he's got the style of play, he's got the willingness to be out in the public and embrace that role. He's got the media savvy. We've seen Trey on podcasts, we've seen Trey on NBA TV, we've seen him at the All-Star game, we've seen all these things. And if you said tomorrow that if you asked somebody and you said showed some video of Trey Murphy on and off the court, you say, is that a franchise player? Most people would say, yeah. So you've got a potential franchise player, you have an actual franchise player in Zion Williamson, and you have an elite role player in Herb Jones. You add to the mix a Jordan Poole, who was slightly less efficient than CJ McCollum last year, but is younger, has been a consistent shooter in the league, has been a scorer, has put up 2 20-point per game seasons in his career, was the third best player on a championship team. Where you look at Steph Curry and Andrew Wiggins, Jordan Poole was the third best player on that championship team, put up over 21 points per game for the Warriors that year. So he's been battle tested. He played at a high pressure program in college at Michigan. He's got a teammate in tow with Kevon Looney, who he's had a great, few years with while he was in Golden State. They know each other well. They have a good rapport already. You bring some dynamic things that you didn't have with CJ McCollum with Jordan Poole because of his size. He's able to get further into the paint. He can put floaters up. He can, do all the things that CJ did, but he gives you a couple more added inches of height with that. So maybe his defensive abilities, which at times last year with the Wizards team that didn't have a great defense, one of the worst defenses we've seen, and was right there with the Pelicans. But Jordan Poole competed for a team that had no reason to compete. That was clearly playing for a lottery spot and trying to get the best shots chance that they could get. Jordan Poole competed for them every night. He missed a lot of minutes. He played low minutes a lot of games because they just didn't want him on the floor to give them a better chance to win. But he was a professional the whole year. You didn't hear anything about his maturity. You didn't hear anything about conflicts with teammates. He showed up and he did his job. And if he can do that for the Pelicans and come in, then you have a very strong top 4 in your roster. No matter what your concerns are with the bench, and there are legitimate concerns with the bench, you still have a very tough top 4. And for the Pelicans this season, any success is going to be getting contributions from your starters at a high level is critical. And that's for every team, certainly. But for the Pelicans, it is really a big deal because they will not have the bench depth that some of these other teams in the West do. This is an unproven bench in a lot of ways. So the Pelicans will lean on their starters. But if you're talking about, if you just take the averages from last season, the averages of last season, everybody didn't have their best year. Zion was around 21 points. You take Zion at 21. You take Trey at 21. That's 42. You give 10 for Herb. That's 52. You give 20 to Jordan Poole, and that's 72 points right there out of your top four. You're doing pretty good. You're trying to get to 110 a night, 115, 72 from your top four. You're in good shape. And I think those numbers will be higher for some players. I think Trey will be higher than 21. I think Zion will be higher than 21. I think it'll be difficult for Jordan to get a higher number because of his ball handling responsibilities. But I think 20 to 21 is a reasonable thing for him. We've seen the Pelicans post 20-point scores before. We've seen it with Brandon, Zion, and CJ. So why can't they do it again with this group? They should be able to do it with this group very easily. And I think that's a real source of optimism for the New Orleans Pelicans. One of the other sources of optimism is the future of this franchise with the rookies that you do have. That rookie class will have the opportunity to challenge the Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, Najee Marshall, Trey Murphy class for the best of this Zion Williamson era. I think that's that group, of three has a real chance because of their upside. They are not finished products by any stretch of the imagination. Jeremiah Fears has franchise player ability, though. He has the look. And it's very similar to Trey Murphy in that regard. When you see him, you see the way he engages with his teammates. When you see the way he deals with the public, when you see the way he plays on the court, even when he's not doing the right thing, it looks like the right thing because he's incredibly confident in what he's doing. He knows who he is as a basketball player, even though he hasn't reached his full potential. He knows what he is as a basketball player. And those things are really hard to come by in life for people to have a kind of understanding of who they are and a confidence in that as well. If there's anything about Jeremiah Fears, he doesn't lack for confidence. The zero fears thing will become a real part of the culture in New Orleans as long as he's here, because I think you see that it's evident in the way he plays. I'm gonna slide this in because it may feel negative, but it's ultimately a positive. If this season doesn't go well, if Zion Williamson is injured, if things have to be rebuilt at some point, if it's either during this season at the trade deadline or next offseason, Pelicans fans have every right to feel confident that the team can rebuild with Jeremiah Fears as one of the centerpieces of that rebuild. If you are, let's say you take Zion out of the equation and your big four becomes Jeremiah Fears at the point, Jordan Poole at the 2, Herb Jones and Trey Murphy rounding out that top 4, you still have a very, if Jeremiah Fears becomes who we think he is, that's still a very formidable top 4. You throw Derik Queen into that mix, and yes, his rookie season is slowed by injury already and the surgery he's had on his wrist. But if Derik Queen can become that kind of interior scorer, and I'm going to say interior rather than post because he's not primarily a post scorer. He's an interior scorer. He likes to face up inside. He can get to the basket. He can finish at the rim. We know all those things. And his outside shot is a work in progress. But if you pull Zion out and you slide Derik Queen into that, he's not going to have the immediate impact of a Zion Williamson. But if he grows into what he's projected to be, you still have a very solid top 4 or 5. Queen is going to have to evolve into a center. He's going to have to, for the Pelicans in particular, because of the way this team is built. And I think that that's actually a better thing for him. For him to focus on his interior game, to get great at that and then expand outward, I think is the right approach for him at this stage. And I think that he can surpass Yves Missi because his upside is greater. If Missi becomes a backup in the long term and Queen becomes your starter, again, I think you have a chance at a very formidable front court in the near future. It's a ways away, but I think you have hope in that your next generation of players, however this cycle goes, and the NBA is quicker cycles than ever as far as turning over your roster. Pelicans fans still have to be very confident about the kind of young players they have. The other part, I'm going to look at this, and it's a brief, and it's not really a great indicator, but if we're looking for good reasons, this is Willie Green's 5th season. He's made the playoffs in every other season so far, right? Made it his first season with 36 wins, getting out of the play-in, getting in the playoffs. Next season, they win 42, don't make it to the playoffs. Get to the play-in, don't make it to the playoffs. Third season, 49 wins, make it to the playoffs. Fourth season, 21 wins, no playoffs. So this is year 5. And if the pendulum continues to swing the way it has, then Pelicans fans have to feel a little bit confidence in the fact that they've made it to the playoffs every other season under Willie. Hopefully he can recapture that magic and find a way to develop the kind of offense that he wants and reinstill the defensive principles that he prided himself on in his first 3 years. If that's the case, if Willie Green has matured, if Willie Green will allow his staff to do the things that they need to do, if Willie Green can reach his players again and re-earn some of their trust, then the Pelicans have a chance to continue that every other season streak under Willie. Of course, you'd like that to become an every season streak. You'd like the Pelicans to make the playoffs every season for like a decade or so. That would be really cool. That'd be, something that this region has yet to experience. But let's start with that. One more playoff appearance this season would be really great in a Western Conference that the bottom half, there isn't much separation between teams. Not even I wouldn't even say the bottom half. I would say the because that makes it seem like it's really bad. But I think when you get from teams 7 to 15 in the Western Conference, outside of Utah, nobody is considered out of the playoffs when the season begins. We want to see what San Antonio is going to be. We want to see what Memphis is going to do. We want to see what Dallas is going to be, even with all their injuries. How do they respond and how do they build around Cooper Flagg in the short term while those guys get ready to play and come back to health? Everybody in the group with the Pelicans, there's not a real separation. So the Pelicans do have an opportunity to surge above that if they can win the games that they're supposed to win and steal a couple of the ones that they're not. That has always been the question for the Pelicans. Can you steal a few more of those you're not supposed to win and win a few more of the ones you are supposed to win, particularly at home? They can't be I think the other part of it is they can't be as bad as they were last year, right? It can't be that bad again. It's only been that bad twice in franchise history, and I doubt you're going to get those things back to back. It took a long time from that previous year for you to experience another year as bad. And I think the Pelicans now, I think it's 20 years between those seasons, between the 2 worst seasons in Pelicans history. Let's hope it takes another 20 years to get back here. But I think that there are some building blocks legitimately for the New Orleans Pelicans, and I think that there are opportunities for the New Orleans Pelicans. The Western Conference is very close, but I don't think it's going to take 49 wins for the Pelicans to make the playoffs. I don't see them as a 49-win team. I just think that there are things that aren't there. But that's not what is going to determine success this year. The number of wins doesn't matter. You had 49 wins and you were 8th seed. The number of wins doesn't matter. What ultimately is that the fans need to see a team that comes out of the gate early this season and plays with a competitive fire. I think that that's possible as long as the injuries don't become any worse between now and the start of the season. If they get off to a good start, fans are going to be in the building. I think fans will show up from day one anyway. They want to see the new Pelicans. They want to see how this team looks. You don't have any preseason games, so I think the anticipation will be any higher. No home preseason games. So I think the anticipation will be really high when the season does begin. I think the fans will be there. The Pelicans have an opportunity again, and it's up to them not to squander it, but they've got a real opportunity to put that foothold and grow within this city. Basketball in the city of New Orleans has never been bad because of the fans. It's always been because of other things that the fans have no control over. The ABA, when the New Orleans Bucks were here, the ABA was always in flux. Teams were moving in a pretty regular basis. That was a league-wide trend. Teams folding and closing and moving. When the Jazz were here, the Jazz played in multiple arenas, couldn't find a home, finally moved into the Superdome. Fans came. They were there. But the team was always in flux. The owner didn't want to be in New Orleans. He never wanted to be in New Orleans. He wanted to go back home. He was from Utah, so he took his team back to Utah. But if you look, some of the highest attended games in NBA history were in the Superdome at that time. Some of the highest attended games in NBA history were in the Superdome to watch Pete Maravich. Wasn't on the fans. But that team played in multiple arenas, couldn't find a real home, it didn't make a real effort to be part of the city. It just existed. Now with the Pelicans, we know the backstory with the owners. We know all those things. But this region has always loved this team. This is a basketball region. Whether you're talking about high school basketball, look at the players that have been produced out of this Southeast and out of the Southeast Louisiana region, Mississippi, those kinds of places, the Gulf Coast. There have been a lot of great basketball players in recent years to come out of this region. It's always been a basketball area. When you look at some of the biggest attended college basketball games, they're LSU games from the 1980s and 90s with Dale Brown brought teams to the Superdome and played against Georgetown, played against UNLV, played against those kinds of teams in the Superdome and brought major crowds. The NCAA tournament always brings major crowds, and it's not just because it's the Final Four. It's because it's New Orleans. The NBA loves to have its all-star games in New Orleans for a reason. It's never been about the fans, and I think that that's something that fans have to hold on to. You've done a good job. You've done what you were supposed to do. You've bought merch. I see it out there in the streets. You bought merch. You bought tickets. You watch it on TV. As Five pointed out last week, when you look at TV ratings, New Orleans market and the markets that support New Orleans, like Birmingham and like throughout the Gulf Coast, higher than normal basketball ratings. If you build it, they will come. If you build it, they will come. If you build a good organization, if you win consistently, the fans will be there. And they have been there. They've been there more than probably you would expect. And when you look at other cities, and you get a lot of comments, and last week we talked about the relocation rumors, you get a lot of cities like Atlanta that have struggled with attendance over the years. I've been to plenty of Hawks games. They're never sold out. It's been a problem. You go to Brooklyn, they have problems selling out, and that's in the biggest city in the country. You know, it wasn't that long ago when the Clippers had trouble selling out before they built their new arena. There are bigger cities that have had problems with attendance, but the focus is always on New Orleans because of the lack of a perception nationally that people care about this team. That is far more of a narrative than an actual story. If folks would come down here and speak to Pelicans fans, if they would speak to the city of New Orleans, people who live in the city of New Orleans and live in this region, they'll tell you they love basketball and they'll tell you they love the Pelicans. They don't want to see this team move. They don't want to see this team in discussions every year about where they're going to be long term. They're tired of it. And it's not their fault. It's not your fault. So I think that there is reason for optimism this season. I don't know what the ceiling is. You'd ever want to put a limit on that. But I think that whether or not the Pelicans win a championship, and I think we would say, even if you are the most optimistic fan, you don't see a championship this season. Let's try to enjoy the journey as best we can. As a journalist, I got my job to do. I'm going to do my job. But I think the best thing is let's try to enjoy the journey and see where it takes us. Let's try to have some fun with this basketball season because the world is going crazy. It's harder to find things to love and believe in right now. Let's just take an opportunity to believe in basketball. And maybe it'll give us some joy and some satisfaction this season. Finally, in other news, it looks like some players of the Pelicans either are tied to or potentially could have been tied to are moving overseas. And I think it's, you look at the center market, it looks like Rashawn Holmes and Thomas Bryant are both negotiating contracts to go overseas. Those are potential players who could have helped the Pelicans on the back end of their bench or the middle of their bench for a guy like Thomas Bryant with an extended, ability to score from the basket. Then Brandon Boston, who the Pelicans waived, he's also in discussions to possibly go overseas. I think when you look at this, and I want to say this real quickly as we get ready to go, when you look at this, the league is in a position where a lot of professional leagues get when you have a salary cap league. When the older players negotiate, they always want more of the cap. And when Chris Paul was the president of the Players Association, he made a real effort to make sure that the top players, and I think ultimately this became short-sighted, where the top players could get the bigger and bigger portion of the cap, and they should get paid more. But when you got players on one team in a salary cap league, and I think that's the most important thing to remember about this, because baseball broke this problem and went through it, but broke it because they don't have a cap. But when you get to a league, and the NFL goes through this as well, quarterbacks take such a big portion of the salary cap. So when you have a limited number of funds because of a cap, and one player is taking up 50% of that, or 40%, or 30%. Even at that, one player taking up 30% of your cap space. It becomes harder to manage when you add quality players around it. And that's why you see these teams being broken up, because they can't afford to stay together. They would love to stay together. Owners would like to pay them to stay together, but you can't do it unless you want to pay a tax, which ultimately I think hurts the league. You want to see, and I think parity is good to a point. Sports leagues were not built on parity. They're built on dynasties. They just are. You go at the NFL, the first team that you know about, the Green Bay Packers, was a dynasty. You know, the teams that you think about, the Dolphins, the 49ers, the Redskins, the Giants, all those teams, multiple championships in a short amount of time. They were dynastic in that quality. We remember some of the one-off teams because they were single-year greatness. But you look at the great coaches, they did it more than once. You talk about the greatest dynasty of the modern era, the New England Patriots. In the NBA was built on the Celtics, the Lakers, the Bulls, the Pistons, the Spurs, the Warriors. Dynasties. Parity is good in that it keeps the regular season really interesting. But if you're talking about revenues and you talk about fan interest overall nationally and getting casuals involved, people need time to get familiar with the show. And sports is entertainment for that part of it. It's deeper than that psychologically with fans, but as far as television goes, it's entertainment. And entertainment is at its best when it's familiar. When a show starts off, think about your favorite show on HBO or Netflix or regular TV, whatever. When it starts off, nobody knows about it. It could be really good, but nobody knows about it. Then there's a point when everybody knows about it, when everybody's watching. Game of Thrones, Sopranos, whatever. Everybody's watching. Even if you're not watching, you know the people because they're everywhere. They're ubiquitous. And sports is like that too. When the ratings are at their highest, it's because teams are familiar. Players are familiar. The regular person on the street knows who these guys are. And that's the problem that baseball has nationally. It's just that folks don't know who these players are because baseball doesn't market itself. It's fine regionally, and baseball lives in that regional area. But the NBA and the NFL are not regional. They are international. They are big. They're huge. They need that attention on a daily basis. That just doesn't come if you don't have familiarity. And I think that potential is frustrating for the league. And I think you're pushing out these middle class of players because the top end is getting so much of the money. So you're forced as a team to take a lot of guys on the minimum. That's why you see this emphasis on rookies and on the draft and bringing in these international players because they're a little bit cheaper. When you get to be a certain age, if you're a 30-year-old role player, it's a lot harder to get a contract. If you're a 27-year-old role player and people don't view you were a first-round pick, but you're just a good NBA player, well, I'll invest in the younger guy because he may have more potential than you. That is a thing that the league needs to figure out when it gets to its next CBA, whenever that is, because it's a problem that impacts the depth on teams. You can't afford to get quality backups because you're paying your starters so much money. All right, that's going to do it for today. I hope that you took some optimism from this episode. I think it was optimistic. I think that there are things to look forward to this basketball season. And I think you should stay optimistic. I think you should stay positive until they take that away from you, until they are mathematically eliminated. Try to believe in what you see. I will do my best to interpret things and give you my perspective and base it in fact and logic. But fans, be irrational, man. Whether you're irrationally positive or what, be irrational in that guard because that's what makes you fans. All right, until the next time, make sure you like, subscribe, share. You know the deal. Follow me on social media at DM Grub on Twitter, Instagram. You can also find me on Facebook, TikTok, and Blue Sky. So look for there as well. Thebirdrights.com as well. And that should do it. So until tomorrow, this has been the Post Up on Boot Crew Media. I'm David Grubb. Y'all have a great day.